Before we create the ring candy, I would like to talk about the preferences that I am using in regards to the add-ons. So if I go under Edit, Preferences, under Add-ons, I have a bunch of add-ons that I've installed. So there's extra curve objects, extra mesh objects, loop tools, node wrangler, and try lighting. If you want to install any of these add-ons, you can go to the website that is extensions.blender.org, and then you can search for whichever add-on that you want. So if I wanted try lighting, okay, so I've searched for it, then I can click on the add-on option, and then I can click on get add-on, and I'll choose download. So when it downloads in my downloads folder, I think I already have it. That is, here it is. So I'm not going to download it again, but I have it already. So once you have it, you need to come over here to the add-ons option, and then at the top of the window, that is the top right, you click on this drop down, and then you'll choose install from disk. Then once you do that, you'll go to your downloads, and then you will find the add-on that you want to install. Then you can click on install from disk, and you will find the installed add-on in your preferences under add-ons. So those are the add-ons that I have active. Okay, so you can choose whichever ones you want, but mostly for this particular course, we're going to use the loop tools, the node wrangler, but the node wrangler is there by default, and I think that's it. And try lighting, sorry. Yeah, so those three. So that's what we're going to use. You can get rid of the preferences window, and then I want to get rid of all of these elements. So I'll hit A on the keyboard and X to bring up the delete option, and I can hit delete. So I want to model the ring pop candy to real life scale. So we'll have to set that up. So my under the view option here on the right hand side, I'm working with meters actually. So we're just going to be kind of translating the actual real life values into meters. So to do that, first of all, I'll hit Shift A, and I'll go under mesh, and I'll add a circle. So here we're creating the candy itself for the ring pop. So in the settings for the circle that are going to pop up on the bottom left, you can change the number of vertices that we have. That is a bit much. We can also change the radius. So under the vertices, I'll choose a small number like 8. And then if I zoom in, the reason I'm choosing 8 is because I want the circle itself to be divided into half, so that I can be able to create a loop that goes around the candy quite easily. So that's why I'm using 8. But I think if you use 6 could also work, but it's not going to give you the best shape. So I'll keep it at 8. Then for the radius, the real life size of the ring pop candy is actually quite tiny. So it is 0.01 meters. So basically it's 10 centimeters. So I'll hit enter. And then on the numerical keypad, I'll click on the period key or the numpad, and then I will be able to zoom in, right? Then you can now get into edit mode. So I'll hit the tab key, and then I can hit the spacebar. So in my case, under preferences, I've set the spacebar to be able to search. So that is, if I go to edit preferences and we go to the key map, under key map we have spacebar action, set it to search. By default it's set to play, so in my case it's set to search. So I will hit the spacebar, and then I'll search for grid fill. So I want to create a face. So I'll click on grid fill, and it creates this huge face. Actually, it's not huge, it's quite tiny. Then I can switch views. So I'll hit the tilde key, that is the key that is above the tab. And then I'll go to the right view. Then I'll hit E to extrude. I'll drag this up. Then I'll hit S to scale. Then I can move this up again, so G, Z. Then I'll hit E to extrude again. Then I'll scale this in. And we have the shape for the ring pop. Then there are a few things I'd like to add. So I'll click on the tab key to exit out of the edit mode. Then in the that is the properties on the right hand side, we're going to go to the modifiers, and in the modifier setting we're going to add a modifier. So I'll start with the bevel. So I'll click on add modifier, then I'll go to generate and I'll choose bevel. So the bevel, I want to add a small rounding on the edges. So this is quite bit much. So in the amount, I can lower this. So maybe type in a smaller value than this. So by default it's 0.1 meters. So I can type in 0.01. So 0.01. So that still doesn't make any huge change. So I'll add another 0. So it's going to be 0.001. And then things start getting better. Then I would like to see the edges themselves. So I can go to the show overlays at the top here, click on the drop down, turn on wireframe. And then now we can start making small increments. So in the amount, you can hold down the shift key and then you can start dragging and you can make small increments. But because this value is really small, it's going to be a bit difficult to make these changes. So I'm just going to manually input. So I want this to be even lower than this. So I'm going to input 0.05. This is also still a bit much, maybe 0.02. So something like that. Then I can add a segment. So that's going to be an edge loop that's going to go through the bevel's edge, right? And then I can make this even more smaller, so 0.1, right? And I think this looks good. So I'll go to the overlays again, turn off wireframe. Then I can add a subdivision surface. So you click on add modifier, generate subdivision surface. That makes the edges more sharper. Then I can also select this object, right click and choose shade smooth, right? Then in the subdivision modifier, I can change the viewport levels from 1 to 2. That makes it really sharp, but you can leave it at 1 if that's what you like. But personally, I want it to be quite sharp, to have really sharp edges. I think that looks more appealing. But you can play around with it and basically look at references. Currently, I'm not using references when I'm modeling, but I would recommend that you check out a few images so that you can be able to kind of have a feel of the model itself, right? So this is how you create the candy for the ring pop. Now that we've created the ring pop candy with just a simple circle, the next thing would be to create the plastic that actually contains now the ring section. So we're going to add a circle. I'm going to hit Shift A, mesh, circle, and it's quite huge. So we'll reduce this. Okay. I think for me it's quite huge because I reloaded the file, so it doesn't remember the settings that I had before. But if you're continuing with your file, it should remember the 8 vertices that we used plus the radius. So for the radius for this is going to be 0.016. And then for the vertices, instead of 32, I'll use something lower like 24. And this is now the plastic, right? Then I'll hit the tab key and then I will search for grid fill. So here it is. Okay. Then what I want is I want this to line up. So I want this edge So this particular edge, let me select it. So Alt click. So this particular edge, I want it to line up with the X axis. So to do that, I'll switch to the top. Then I'll hit A to select everything. Then I will start rotating. So I'll hit R and then just rotate it up to that point. The reason I want this is because usually with these ring pop candies, there's a particular line that runs from this area downwards, and also there's also a line that runs through the plastic. So that's what I want to mimic with this. So for now, we're just setting up the base shapes, and then later on we're going to refine. So I'm going to hit E on the keyboard, and then I'll drag this down just a bit, like that, for example. Okay. Then I'll tab out, right? Then the other thing I would like to do is, usually with these ring pop candies, at the center here, there's always like a plastic piece. So I'll hit the backslash to get into isolation. I'll hit the tab, then I'll hit 3 to get into faces. Then I will select these 3 faces. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert these faces. So I'll hit I and then drag, then click to accept. That is on the left mouse button. Then I want this to be circular. So that's where the loop tools come into play. So I'll right click, loop tools. So remember, under my preferences, so edit, preferences, add-ons, this is loop tools add-on that I have added or that I have installed. So that's what is going to pop up when I hit the right mouse button, and the first option is loop tools. So I'm going to choose circle, and then I'm going to maybe scale it up a bit. So I'll hit S just a bit. Then I can switch to the front, I think. Then I'll hit E, then S, then G, Z to move it. Then the thing that I want us to add is a subdivision surface. So with this selected, we'll go to the add modifier, and then under generate, we can add subdivision surface. But notice it's not that appealing, like things kind of messed up, right? So I could use the bevel, but I would prefer to just set this up myself. So let me show you what I mean. So I'll hit the tab key. Then I will just turn off the subdivision modifier in the edit mode. Then I'll start adding edge loops myself, just to reinforce where I want to have hard edges and where I want the mesh itself to be smooth. So I'll add edge loops around here. So I'll hit Ctrl R, and if I hover here and drag my, or rather move my middle mouse up and down, you can see we're adding edge loops. So I just want to add 2. And then I'll turn this back on to see what's happening. Then I'll come over here. We still have that clipping issue. So clip start, under view, I can reduce this. Then again, the reason I'm having this issue is because I reloaded my file. So it doesn't remember what I had said before. So Ctrl R again, but the same, I'll just have one loop. Then I'll click, then I'll drag it up. Then I'll click to accept. Then the same here, Ctrl R, that is for this top face. Actually, yeah, so Ctrl R. I'm kind of having a difficult time choosing it. So a better way would be if I hit 3, select these faces, and I insert. Then I have an edge loop created, right? Then I can add another edge loop around here. So Ctrl R, somewhere there. So I'll drag, and again Ctrl R and drag. Of course, with this we can choose to bevel actually. So if I undo this, I can select this edge loop. So I'll hit 2, Alt Shift, then I can choose to bevel. So bevel the edges. Then as I drag, I can click, or as I drag my mouse, I can actually adjust the middle mouse and I can add a new loop. So I just want one loop. So you can drag the middle mouse up, down. That's going to determine the number of edge loops that you want. So 1 is fine. Okay. Then I can come over here. So over here we can, again, I'll shift, but here we're having the issue of, we need to come and select manually because it doesn't select the loop itself. And then we can do it for the top one and the bottom one at the same time. You can choose to bevel. So you can choose bevel edges, so spacebar, bevel edges, and again, just one loop. And to make like a subtle adjustment, hold down Shift and then drag and click to accept. Right? Now if I turn this back on, you can see I exit that this is more reinforced, and we can select this, right click, choose shade smooth, and we have our plastic. And now if I exit isolation mode by clicking on the backslash, this is what we have. We have our ring pop, and then we have the plastic itself. So what we're missing is the ring. To create the ring, we'll need to start with a circle once more. So I hit Shift A, go to mesh, and then I will choose circle. And then I'm going to rotate the circle. So I'm going to basically hit RX. But before I do that, there's nothing I'm changing under the vertices. I'm not changing the radius. I'll change this within the mesh itself, so in the edit mode. So I'll just hit X90. Then I'll switch to the front view. Then I will hit Tab 1 to see my vertices, and then I can hit S. Then I can move this down, so GZ, then S again, okay, then GZ. Yeah. Actually, before I actually move it that high, I just want to see the circle in its entirety. So now what I can do, I can click and drag to select these points, and I want to flatten them so that they lie flat, like horizontally. So to do that, the points are selected. I can hit S, then Z, because the Z axis is the vertical axis, so Z. Then I'll type in 0. So S, Z0. And we flatten the points, they're horizontal. Then I want to create the extrusion, so a surface. So I'll hit A, then I'll hit E for extrusion, then S for scale. Then I can actually see my extrusion. Okay. Then I can switch to the right view. Then I can move this up now. So GZ. Actually, let me escape. Let me hit A to select everything. Then GZ to that point. Then GY. So I'll move it there so that when I choose to create the thickness, it goes up to somewhere here. So now I can hit E, then drag and click to accept. So now we have the ring itself, right? So if I switch to the front view, the ring usually has an opening here. So I need to select these faces and delete them. So I'll hit Z to go to wireframe, then I'll hit 1. Then I'll click elsewhere to deselect. Then I can select the faces I want to delete. So there's this, so I'll hit S, then I'll choose delete faces. And maybe I should delete even more. Actually vertices, sorry. X vertices. But I feel like that's too large, I guess. So maybe them being tiny is fine. The gap being tiny is fine. Okay. Then I need to close this hole because there's a hole. If I go to solid, so I'll hit 2, select these 2 edges, then hit F to fill that face. Select this edge and this edge, hit F to fill. Then I'm going to create a bunch of edge loops. So I'll create edge loops on the outside and on the inside. So Control R and click, actually double click so that the edge loop is centered. Then on the inside, Control R, then double click to accept. The reason I'm adding these edge loops is, first of all, I want to reinforce the surface, the mesh itself. And also I want to have good geometry to allow me to make adjustments here. So if I go back to the front view, hit Z wireframe, and I hit 1. Then deselect, I can select this and move it. Then I can select this and move it. Okay, so I've just refined that so that it's not like really hard. I want it to have like a good sort of curvature, right? So now that we have that, I would like to reinforce some of these edges. Of course, you could use the bevel modifier, but I'd prefer not to. So I'll hold down Alt and then Shift. Okay, actually, let me use the edges option. So Alt Shift stops here, Alt Shift. Okay, then Alt Shift for that. So I'll select on both sides so that I can make the changes to the mesh quite easily, right? Then I can choose bevel edges. Then I can drag. Just want a tiny increment. So hold on Shift, remember, to kind of control the increments. Then I can click to accept. Then I can tab out. Then if I select this and choose Shade Smooth, doesn't look so bad. Then I can add a subdivision modifier. So subdivision surface, see what happens, right? So here I'm noticing that this has a slight curvature, which I don't like. I wanted it to be flat and kind of a bit slightly harder, and this is quite soft. So we'll need to fix that. But so far, so good. So to fix that, we'll just need to reinforce this edge and this edge as well. So I can turn this off in edit mode. Okay. Then actually what I can do, actually let me undo this step. Okay, so I've undone the steps, just having selected the edge loops so that I can add this edge loop to my selection and this edge loop as well. And we can actually enter isolation mode so that we can actually see. So those are the edge loops I forgot to select, as well as this one. Oops, sorry. So let me just hold down Shift and select this and this, right? Okay, so I just forgotten this. That's why I got that smooth surface. Then I can choose bevel edges. Then I can click and drag, hold down Shift. So small change, because if you make it huge, it's going to be really smooth. So I want it to be quite small. So at the top here, I'm seeing 0.00083. So I want it to be smaller than that. So let me release Shift so that now I can make that change. Then hold down Shift and I want the small increments. Then I can click to accept, then tab out. Then I can add a subdivision surface. Then I can right click, Shade Smooth, and it gives me that hard surface. So of course, if you didn't want this to be this hard, you can actually not have it selected, but I had selected mine. So yeah, so the difference between what I've done by using the, if I tab in, by using the bevel edges is that I'm actually making changes to the actual mesh. But if I use the bevel modifier, I'm not actually making like exact changes on the mesh. I can actually get rid of the bevel anytime I want the bevel modifier. But for this is something that is permanent. So you have to remember that, and you have to be able to choose when you choose bevel edges in edit mode and when you choose the bevel modifier. So for the candy, I use the bevel modifier, but for this, I chose to kind of define the type of mesh that I want, right? So I want it to be slightly harder because that's how they kind of are. So if I hit the backslash to exit isolation mode, this is what we have, right? So quite pleased with it. Okay, so the next thing would be probably some candy overflow, because usually for these types of candies, this isn't perfect on the surface here. On the surface of this plastic, there's always some thin film of candy on the surface, and that's the next thing that we'll do. To create the candy overflow, I'm going to actually extract what I need for that from the candy itself. So I'll hit the tab key. Then I want this edge loop. at the base. So I'll hold down Alt Shift. Yeah, it's not allowing me. So let me just go around. Alt Shift, Alt Shift, Alt Shift. Right? So I've selected the entire loop. So what I'm going to do is Shift D to duplicate. Then actually let me undo that. I think I clicked Shift D a lot. So let me select this and this. Okay, so Shift D, click, then click on the spacebar, then search for separate, but then you'll choose separate by selection. So whatever we've selected. So click on selection and you'll notice that we'll get another circle. But because all of these are named circle, we can't be able to make the distinction until we select it. So I'll just click on the tab key to exit edit mode, then find the, if I hit Z, wireframe. So if I click on this circle.003, that is what I have extracted. So now what I need to do is basically I need to rename this. So this is the ring candy. Then this is ring plastic surface. And then this is the ring. It is a ring. I call it like the ring loop. Then with this, I'll call it the candy overflow. Okay. So now that we have that, I'm going to get rid of the bevel and the subdivision. Then one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the top view and I'll hit tab 1 to select the points, hit A, then I'll scale this down just a bit. So I'll hit S, just a bit. Then I'll hit 2 for the edges. Then I'll hit E to extrude. Then I'll hit S to scale that extrusion. So right now you're not seeing much because I am in the wireframe mode. But if I click to accept, then I hit set solid, you'll see that I do have a surface. Okay, so the reason why I scale this on the inside is so that I don't have a gap over here, which was something that, of course, if you do not scale it in a bit or scale in those edges in a bit, you're going to have a gap. So now I can hit 3, then A, then I can extrude up. But before I do that, I want to shape the mesh. So with all the faces selected, I'll hit spacebar. Then I'm going to choose subdivide. So I'll click on subdivide and the subdivide settings will pop up. So we can choose the number of cards. So is it 1, is it 2? So I'll choose 2 maybe, and that's it. Then I'll start making my adjustments. So I'll switch to the top view. Then I'll hit Z, toggle X-ray. Then I'll hit 1 for points. So this inner edge loop, this one, I do not want it to be touched in regards to making changes to this because I want it to look a bit blobby. So I'll ensure that, of course, if I touch them, I'll kind of make the changes by adjusting them. So what I want is we're going to kind of start making this look very liquid-like, just a bit, and then we're going to create an extrusion. So for this to work, I'm going to use the proportional editing tool that's at the top here. I click on that, and if I click on the drop down, we're set to smooth. Okay, so I'm going to select this point. Then I will hit G. When I hit G at the top, you'll see proportional size smooth, and then the size of the circle that's supposed to be doing the proportional editing is 1.0000 meters. So I'm going to start lowering that value till it gets to 0.0 something. So up to, let's say here, right? Then now I can start moving. So I can move this, then I can make this adjustment, move it up to that point. I can come to this, hit G, move it. Maybe come in here, hit G, move it. You can move it inside as well. Okay. And come here, hit G, hit G. G. So you're just going to be choosing like random areas to kind of make your changes. So I'm trying to avoid touching the points in the inner edge loop. Okay. So let me undo this. Right. Something like that. I think I'm satisfied with this. And if we switch back and hit Z solid, okay, actually we're in the solid mode. So it kind of seems silly. So in the top view, I would recommend that you do your editing, especially if you have extruded your mesh, you do it in the wireframe, right? But I was doing it in the X-ray mode. Okay, so I'll go back to solid, turn off X-ray. Then I can hit 3, then A, then E, then Z, just a bit. Actually, let me hit just G, actually E, just a bit. You don't need to hit the Z axis because it's going to move up if you drag up. So up to that point, probably, because I don't want it to be too thick. Right, so GZ now if you want to make your adjustments. Okay, then I'll tab out. Then I'm going to add a subdivision surface. So in the modifiers, go to generate subdivision surface. And then we can select it, right click, shade smooth. And then I would recommend that you look for a gap between the candy and the overflow. And then one thing I would do is I would increase the resolution of this because it's very low resolution in regards to smoothing. So I'll increase it to 2 levels in the viewport. And now it looks quite good. So we have our base objects set up. The next thing would be to refine that particular loop that I talked about. That is quite distinct when you loop at these candies. None of them misses it. So it's going to be on the candy, it's going to be on the plastic surface, and it's also going to be on the loop. Like for us to refine this particular mesh, of course you could leave it as it is, but there's a small edge that goes around the candy, goes around the plastic surface, and it goes around the ring loop. So we'll start with the candy. So get into edit mode. Then I'll select the edge loop. So I hit 2. Alt click on the edge to select the loop. And if I hit Z wireframe, you'll see that the entire edge loop has been selected. Then hit the spacebar and I will search for bevel edges. And when I start dragging my mouse, you can see that the beveling will start working. So I need a small value and I need to have an extra edge loop in the middle. So I will drag my middle mouse scroll wheel up a step. So if I drag it up a step, I add 1 edge loop. If I drag it up twice, thrice, so those are the numbers that I'll have. So I'll just hold down Shift to make a small change. Okay. Then I need to, again, select this edge loop. So I'll hold down Alt and click. Should select the edge loop. One thing about what I'm trying to do is that we cannot do it with the bevel on because some funny stuff is going to start happening to the mesh. So we need to kind of turn off the bevel modifier together with the subdivision modifier. Then I can hit the backslash to isolate. Then I can hold down Control to deselect these edges at the bottom. So let me just select again, then deselect. Then for this, I'm going to scale. So I'll hit S. And again, I can't scale because my proportional editing tool is open. So I'll hit Escape. And at the top here, I will turn off the proportional editing. Then I can hit S and scale this up. Okay, so remember, hold down Shift to make small increments. There we have the kind of extrusion that I want. At the bottom here, I don't want any extrusion, and it's actually not going to be seen. So I'm going to have that over there, and that's why I deselected. Then I can tab out. Then I can turn on bevel. I can turn on subdivision, right? So both in the renderer, in the viewport, and in the edit mode. So this looks quite good. Now we can exit isolation mode, and we can do the same for the ring plastic surface. So this object right here. So I can hit the tab key to get into edit mode, and then I can select the edge loop. So make sure that you have all your elements visible, especially the candy, because that's the one that we've used to determine the placement of the particular extrusion. So for example, because I've chosen this side, I can't come and select this particular edge loop. I have to make sure that they match. So I'll select this edge, click Alt, select the whole edge loop. Then I can zoom in, hit the spacebar, look for bevel edges. You should remember, if not, just type in bevel and you should see bevel edges, and drag, and then adjust the scroll wheel. Then hold down Shift to make tiny increments. Let's do something like that. Then we can select this edge loop. So I can hold down Alt, click. I can switch to the right view. So one thing about this right here, we're not going to be scaling it up. We're actually going to be moving it up. So if I actually first of all enter the isolation mode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Z, wireframe. When I'm in wireframe mode, I'm going to hit 1 so that we swap from the edges to vertices. Then I can hold down Control and deselect these points at the bottom. Then I can switch back to solid. Then I can also switch back to edges, but I can still use the vertices, but I'd prefer to see the edge, so I'll hit 2. And if I inspect this, you'll see that I only have the edge on the top surface selected. Then I can hit G, Z, and I can move this up. So let me hit escape first, then turn off the subdivision surface. Then I can hit G, Z, and then hold down Shift to make a tiny increment. At that point, then we can turn back to subdivision, and I can tab out to see what I have. So right now the value, especially for this particular flat surface, isn't that visible, or rather the thickness isn't visible, not the value but the thickness. So I'll come back here and then I will hit G, Z again, bring this up, then tab out, and now I'll start seeing the change. So I'll just turn off the subdivision modifier in edit mode, and I'll just make this larger. So GZ, maybe up to that point. Then turn this back on, increase the levels in the viewport from 1 to 2, and this is what we have. Then I'm going to repeat the same for the bottom and also for the sides. So I'll tab, hold down Alt, click on this edge, select the whole edge loop, and then swap to the right view. Then hit Z, wireframe, hit 1 to go to vertices. This time I will deselect everything from here upwards. So Control, click and drag, right? Then I can hit Z, solid. Then I can hit 2 to go back to edges. Then I can hit G, Z, this down, right? And because my subdivision surface is on, it's going to look a bit fishy. So I'll turn it off first. Then G, Z, move this. Then turn this back on. And then I can tab out, see what I have at the bottom. You can see very nice edge. Then for the sides, I'm going to tab in. I'll select this edge. So it's just one edge. And then I'll go to the other side, hold down Shift, select this edge. And for this, I'm going to scale. So because I've selected both at the same time, the changes will update for both sides. So I'll just hit S and drag this out. Remember to hold down Shift. And I can tab out, and this is what we have, right? So I can exit isolation. So if you feel like this is a bit much, we can reduce this. So I can select those edges, G, Z. Actually, there's also another one here. but we're not going to see this that much, but I just prefer for this to match this other one here. So GZ. Yeah, so now it looks perfect. Next, let's refine the edge for the ring loop. Exit isolation mode. Now we can focus on the ring. So first of all, I'll hit the tab key. Then I can select this edge, hold down Alt, and we can bevel. So again, make sure you're looking at your meshes to ensure that you're selecting the correct edge loop. But I think for this, it's a bit more straightforward compared to the plastic surface. So I can hit the spacebar, bevel edges, drag up to that point, I guess. Okay. Then, just like we did with the plastic surface, we're going to repeat the process. So I'll get into isolation mode, and then I'll deactivate the subdivision surface in the edit mode, not in the viewport or in the renderer. So just tab in, select this edge loop, the middle one, Alt click. Then there are other edge loops that I'd like to deselect. So this time I cannot use the side views and all that, so I'll just have to manually use the perspective. So I'll hold down Control and just go around deselecting. So like, just deselect everywhere. I don't need to have edge selections just yet, right? And make sure you're doing it in this is the solid mode. Don't do it in the wireframe, because when you do that in the wireframe, it's going to also do the same to any faces behind the faces the edges you're trying to deselect. So now that I've confirmed my selection, I can switch to the view. Then I can hit Z wireframe, then I can hit S, scale it up a bit. Then I can, again, Z solid, turn on the subdivision surface in the edit mode, then I can tab out to see. And I have the loop, right? There's something funny happening here. Yeah, so because I think there's something I selected, which is this. So yeah. Okay, so I think I hadn't noticed that, as well as these. I don't think these matter as much, but I'll deselect them just to be safe. Also on this other side, let me zoom in. So again, the clipping is still happening. So I'll go to view and I'll reduce this. That is the clip start. But right now I think we're at the ultimate bottom, so it can't go below that. So I'll just try my best. Select that. Then again, front view, Z wireframe. Then I can hit S, hold down Shift, right? Then Z again, solid, tab out. If I turn this back on, we do see the edge loop have some thickness, right? Okay. Then I can tab in again, turn this off again. So this is very repetitive. So let's work on this. So I'll select that. Just a few edges here. Okay. Then on the other side, I'll repeat the same. So I prefer to do it manually, but you can turn on the symmetry options at the top. That's always an option. But for the sake of this tutorial, I just do it manually, just to kind of explain why is it that I'm doing certain things. So I'll hit S and drag this, hold down Shift, click to accept, tab out. Then we can turn this back on. And we haven't noticed the change. So again, S, that is in the front view. So turn this off, S, tab out. Now we are seeing something, right? And if I turn on the subdivision surface. You can see, right? Then again, you can hit the tab key, turn this off. Then I'll select this edge loop again. Then I can come in and deselect the things that I don't want. So like that. Then zoom in here, deselect that as well. Maybe I can leave that tiny edge, then deselect these. These are the bottom here. Okay. I'll zoom in here. I think I'll leave that as it is. Then we can go to the side. So here I can go to the right view. Then I can deselect this whole edge loop, but not on the other side, just on one side. Then I can go to the left, select this. Then I can go to the top, select this. And I just remain with the ones at center. Then I can hit S to scale down, inside, sorry. Hold down Shift and click. Then you can tab out, right? Then we can turn this back on, increase the number, and this is what we have. Okay, so if I bring everything back, so I think there's something funny that has happened here. I think I have something selected. Yeah, this small edge that's messing up my setup. So some of these small edges can be problematic. So again, S, Shift, click, right? And I can tab out to look at my mesh. So always inspect your mesh whenever you're modeling. So I chose to do it manually, but definitely I would have used the symmetry option at the top here. So this is the mirror. I think I've been saying symmetry. It's the mirror in Blender. So then I can hit backslash and bring back my models. And this is what I have. And then one thing is that because of this, I need to make adjustments to my candy overflow. So for that, I could select these edges and move them up, GZ, and do the same for the other side. That's this. Okay, now I can tab out. Maybe pull this forward, even up. GZ. I think it's looking good. So you can just tinker with it, make a few adjustments here and there until you're satisfied, right? So this looking as it is right now, I think this is how it should look, because of course, if there's a bump, the surface should also have like a slight bump. That is the candy overflow. So this looks quite realistic, I'd say. So this is how I modeled this particular object, the ring pop candy, with all of these elements. So the next thing would be doing things like the lighting and the shading. The next thing I'd like for us to do is to create the bubbles inside the candy. So the candy usually has some bubbles that are scattered inside. So to create that, we're going to make use of geometry nodes. So before we actually make use of the geometry nodes, we need to duplicate this mesh for the candy. So I'll hit Shift D. And once I hit Shift D, there's going to be a duplicate. So here you can see ring candy.001. So I'll rename it. I'll call it candy bubbles. Then I can hit Z, go to wireframe. I can hit the tab key when the bubbles are selected. Then I can hit A to select everything. Then S to scale this down. Then accept. So we're just scaling it down a bit so that any bubbles that we create, they'll not be peeking out of the candy. So I can hit tab to exit out of the edit mode. Then I can click on the backslash to isolate the mesh that's going to have the bubbles. Then I'll go back to solid. Now I'll change the editor here from timeline to geometry nodes. So on the top left of this window, click on the editors option and then go to the geometry node editor. Then we can go to the modifiers for this particular candy mesh, and then we can get rid of the modifiers that we have, the bevel and the subdivision. This looks a bit strange, but that's because we have shade smooth on. So I can select this, right click and choose shade flat. Then we can go to add modifier and then we can choose geometry nodes. And then we can click on new. Once we click on new, we should see something here. So I'll click on new and then we're going to see our two nodes, our group input and our group output. So our group input is the default result that we're feeding in. So the mesh that we can see here, the group output shows the final result. So I'll start by doing a simple thing, which is distributing creating a volume first. Then we're going to use that volume to distribute points. Then those points are going to be used to kind of be used as a guide to place our bubbles. But of course, you don't need to use geometry nodes if you don't want to. Normally you'd say you duplicate all of the bubbles that you like. That's also something you could do, but I prefer this method because it is more procedural, more manageable. So this is going to allow us to have full control and we're not going to manually have to change things, which is why geometry nodes are more useful in this context. So I'll hit Shift A, then I will search for mesh to volume. Then I'll just hover this node where we have this green line and then I'll click. The software will connect the node automatically between the two group nodes. So the next thing we need to do is we need to make a few changes to this because currently we can't see anything. So in this mesh to volume node, I'm going to change the density. Because we're working in real life scale, this density of 1 is quite small. So I'll use a value of 2 million. And then I will change the resolution mode from amount to size. And then I'll change the voxel size from 0.3 meters to 0.0001 meters. So then we have our volume. Then I want to have points be created and distributed within this mesh. For that to be possible, we're going to use a node called distribute points in volume. So I'll hit Shift A, then I'll search for distribute points in volume. So I'll click on this and connect it after mesh to volume. This is what we have, right? Then the next thing that I'd like for us to do is now to have these points, because whatever we are seeing are placeholders for the points. But because we're working in real scale, that's why they're so huge, because by default, the scale that is being used is, again, quite huge. So I'll hit Shift A and I'll look for a node called instance on points. So instance on points is going to allow us to kind of determine what kind of objects do we want to be placed on these points that have been created. So I'll connect and you see nothing happens. Now whatever we're seeing has disappeared. So in the distribute points in volume node, I'll change the density to something like 20, right? Then we need an instance. So all of these, if you notice these inputs, we are all working with geometry because they're all green. So again, with the instance, we need also geometry. So I'll hit Shift A and then I'll search for a sphere. And you can use a UV sphere, an icosphere. So I think I'll use a UV sphere. Then I'll reduce the segments maybe to 12, the rings maybe to 8, and the radius, let's say 0.1. Then I'll connect this mesh to instance. Then notice we have so many spheres. So I'll reduce the radius further. So maybe 0.05. No, 0.005. Yeah, so now it works, as you can see, right? So far, we introduced a mesh to volume node that converted our mesh to a volume. Then we made changes to the density. Because we're working in real life scale, the density has to be really high. We also made adjustments to the voxel size, and in terms of the resolution mode, we're using size instead of mount. Because I found size works best compared to amount for this. Then we have the next node, which is distribute points in volume. This node takes this volume and then it kind of create points inside it. And the density determines the number of points that you have. So if you say 20, you have 20 points. If I say 30 points, right? And then we have the instance on points. This node controls what type of mesh is going to be placed on those points that have been created, right? So it could, in some instances, not be points. It could be, or rather, in some instances, the instance can not only be one particular object like this one. It can be a collection, and that's why we have the option for pick instance and that and all that. Because if you have a collection of like 10, 20 things, you can tell it to pick automatically. So in our case, we're just making use of one. And if I zoom in, you'll see that the resolution is determined by the segments that I've set. So if I increase this, it's going to increase here. So I'll keep it quite low, 12 and 8. The radius is also quite low, 0.0005. So we have our instance, but we're not done yet. So this instance on points kind of helps you to kind of distribute the mesh or whichever object you want to be placed on the points that you've been creating. So one thing that I'm going to do, the next thing I'm going to do is for these spheres, I want them to be smooth, right? So I'm going to add a node that's going to do that. So I'll hit Shift A, then I'll search for set shade smooth. So this one, click on it, then I'll place it after the UV sphere, and it's going to make it smooth. Because we can't select it and right click and say shade smooth, that won't work. And then the other thing is for material for the bubbles, it needs to be set in the geometry nodes. So I again need to add a node for that. So I'm going to again Shift A, then set material. So here's the set material mode, connect it after set shade smooth. So at this point you might say, yeah, we're done, but we're not done. There's one thing that's remaining. If I select this and hit G, the thing that remains is the size of the spheres. All of these spheres have the same size, and I want some of them to be large. I want others to be small. So I'm going to hit Shift A and I'm going to type in random value, right? This random value node, I'm going to use it to affect the scale. So if you look at the instance on points node, there's rotation, there's scale. So this scale, I want it to be connected to the random value. And this scale value, if I hover over it, it says float. So that means you also need to make sure that the random value data type is float as well. Float is a number with a decimal point. An integer is a whole number. You have a boolean that's either on and off, and so on and so forth, right? So here, I want to connect this value to the scale. And because the minimum is set to 0 and the maximum is set to 1, some of these spheres are going to disappear because some of them are going to be assigned a scale of 0, sorry, that's going to make them disappear. So I'll connect, and you'll see some of them, you can't be able to see them. Either they become really tiny or they disappear completely. So The minimum value, I don't want it to be set to 0. I'll set it to maybe 0.08. That's the minimum size a sphere can have. And then the maximum is 1. And then we have the seed. The seed changes whatever arrangement that is being set up scale-wise or size-wise. So I can adjust this and we get different results. Similar to the distribute points in volume, you can adjust the seed and you'll get a different organization of the bubbles. And this is basically something that you use, especially if you notice that some of these bubbles kind of intersect with the candy. So if I exit isolation mode by clicking on the backslash and then I hit Z wireframe, this is what we have. So as you can see, there's this sphere that is inside this particular extrusion. So we can adjust the seed to change that, right? But I don't think it's going to matter that much for us in this instance. So I'll leave it as is. So for the minimum, I think the minimum size of this, maybe I could set it to 0.1. Then the maximum, I could even go to 2. There's nothing that's going to stop me from having a scale of 2 because the value is available. So our geometry nodes setup is, again, we start by converting the mesh to a volume, and then we kind of want to have points distributed in the volume. Once that happens, we want those points to now have a mesh assigned to it. And for that to be possible, we're going to use an instance on points, where we're going to kind of give it the points that it needs to create copies on. And then we're also going to give it the mesh that it's going to distribute on those points. Then we're also going to randomize the scale. If we were not using spherical shapes, let's say we were using something else, we could also use a random value to randomize the rotation as well. But in my case, I just want to randomize the scale. So that's how we create the bubbles. So if you wanted more, you would come to the density, type in, let's say 50, you'll get more bubbles. But this is a bit too much, so I'll leave it at 20. I think 20 is fine. Yeah. So that's how you create these bubbles. I'd like for us to do some lighting for this scene. So we'll start by setting up a camera, and then we can set up the lights. So for the camera, you can hit Shift A and click on camera. And I'm actually going to hit M, then click on a new collection. And I'll change the name of this to render. Call it lighting and render, so that everything that is going to be associated with this are in one collection. So I'll click on create. So here in the outliner, you can see that's what we have. Then this collection, I can call it scene objects. So what I can do currently is I can zoom in to the model. Then I can hold down Control Alt 0. So Control Alt 0 will make this my current view. And as you can see, there's an issue. Yes, I have made this into my current view, but I can't see anything. So over the creation of the model, we've been changing the clip start whenever we have clipping in our mesh. But right now we're looking through the camera whose clipping is a bit different. So if I select the camera and then we go to the data settings for the camera, we can reduce the clip start. And you can see that this now comes back when the clip start is set to 0.001 meters. Then you can go to these settings for setting up the image size. So that is under this output icon. So this printer icon with an image. So I'll change the resolution from 1920 by 1080 to, let's say, 1000 pixels by 1000 pixels. Okay. So then if you want to adjust your framing, what we can do is in the view option, my camera is selected. We can choose to go to view lock. So if yours is minimized, you can maximize it. Then you can set the camera to view. Once you set the camera to view, once you start moving around, so if I start moving around, you can see that we're kind of adjusting our camera view. So I'm going to use these icons on the right to make my adjustments. And then you can also use this gizmo at the top as well. So this is how I prefer to do it. But of course, there are many ways to do one thing. So I'm just trying to frame up my object. So I think that's fine. Once you're satisfied with your framing, you need to turn off camera to view, because when you forget about turning this off, what's going to happen is you'll make a change and ruin your framing. So you need to turn it off. So I'll turn it off, then you can go back to item. So now if I rotate, I'm out of the camera view. I want to jump into the camera view. I can click on this camera option like so, or I can hit 0 on the numerical keypad. So there are many ways to do the same thing. So the reason I've set up the camera first is because we're going to be using the add-on tri-lighting. So there's this add-on that I had talked about at the beginning of this tutorial series, the add-ons that I was using. So this is the first one that I want us to use, so tri-lighting. So make sure that you kind of click on get add-on, download, then you can install it in your preferences. Now I can add the tri-lighting. So I can hit Shift A, then we can go to light, 3-point lighting, and the lights are going to be added, as you can see in the scene if I zoom out, and also in the scene objects collection, because that's the collection I had selected by default. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, we're going to make a few changes. Okay, so the lights are far away, so I'm going to need to move them closer to the object. So in the settings for the 3-point lighting, we have the height, the distance, base energy, contrast. All of these are things that we need to change. So I'll change the height. So I'll take this down like so. Then I'll also reduce the distance, and then reduce the height again. Okay, then I think that's a good distance. Then for the base energy, here I could set a really low value because our object is quite small. 100 is quite a high value, so I'll set it to, let's say, 5. Then we can make our adjustments, right? So 5 watts instead of 100 watts. So when this is done, we can go to the render settings, the render properties. I'll change the render engine from Eevee to cycles. Then I'll change my device from CPU to GPU compute, because I do have a GPU. If you're using a GPU, make sure that you have defined it in your preferences. So go to Edit, Preferences, and under System, you can see in my case I'm using the RTX 4050. So you need to define whichever CPU you want to use. So if you're using Intel's CPU, you have to use like one API, and of course my other options are on, or rather I can see other available options, but I'll leave it at the CUDA setting. So once I have changed the render engine to cycles, in the sampling for viewport, I will change it from 1024 to 256, and I'll do the same for the render. Maximum samples 256. Then I can select an object, hit the period in the numerical keypad so that I can zoom in. Then I can hit Z, rendered, so we can see what we have. Then I can get into the camera view, right? Then I'll select these lights first. So I'll select all 3. So I'll select the first one, hold down Shift, select the last one. Then I'll hit M, and I would choose to add them to lighting and render. So once I've done that, I can now start making some changes here and there. So I'll create a secondary view. So I'll split this view into two. So the bottom here, I'll hover on this farthest end until I get this crosshair. Then I can click and drag. Then for this view on the right, sorry, I'm going to make it be the 3D viewport. Then this is the camera. So I will deactivate the lights. So I'll turn them off, turn this off as well. Then I'll turn them on one by one. So I'll turn it on in the viewport and in the render. Then I'll start adjusting the lights themselves. So I'll start with the key. The key light is the main light in any scene. And I'll go to the settings for the light, the data properties. Then the power is set to 5, so I'd try 10, see what I get. Maybe 10 is fine. 12. Let's say 12. Then I'll activate the fill. So the fill is always placed. So if I go to the top view, this is the key. So in regards to the camera, it's placed 45 degrees from the camera. Then we have the fill, which if I turn it on, it's placed on the opposite side of the key, and its function is to fill in shadows. So one thing I want to adjust in the key is the size. So I'll select the fill, hide it for a minute. I also hide this in the render, select the key light, and then in the setting, we have the size. So the larger the light source, the more spread out the shadows will be. The smaller the light source, the harsher, more sharper, the more distinct the shadows will be. So if I reduce this, you can see I'm starting to have a really harsh shadow over here. Okay, so I just wanted to reduce it a bit. Something like that. Then I can bring in the fill. Okay. Then for this fill, for the key, remember I adjusted the power from 5 to 12. So for the fill, it can't be 2, it needs to be something higher. So most of the time, maybe 75% of the key. So if the key is 12, let's say have it at 8 maybe. So if I feel like it's a bit much, I could reduce it, right? And maybe I could move this. I could hit G and adjust. Adjust the size of the key. Okay. Also the fill as well. But notice it makes the area just below the ring plastic surface to be really dark. So you can reduce this. You can fix that later. Okay. Then we have the back. So the backlight is placed at the back of the object, and its main purpose is to help separate your object from your background. So if I look at it, this is where it is. I wouldn't change the size. I don't want it to create a harsh shadow on the front of this. So maybe I could set the power to, let's say, 6. So if I turn these lights on, just to see what's happening. So I have the key, and I have the fill. So I feel like the fill is a bit much. So maybe I could make this 3.5. Then I have the back, right? So we have all of them working. Then we can add a light at the bottom here if need be, but I'll leave that for now. We can add a background if we'd like, just a simple plane. So I can select the scene objects, collection, Shift A, mesh, and add a plane. Then with this plane, I can hit R, Y, 90. Then I can move it back. So that's GY. Actually, yeah. So that's GY. sorry, X. I know I said Y, GX. Not wrong. So I need to move it further. If I look at it, the camera is looking at this direction, so I need to move it there. So that's now G, Y. Maybe I could rotate it a bit. So let me go to the top view. I can move it. Right? Then I can hit tab, scale it up. And then move it. So we do have a background. And I've placed it far away from the object. But I can still tinker with that. Whatever I set up is not final. So I can still come in and move it however I want. But for what I need, I think it's fine. Then at the bottom, we can add another light. Just to light this area over here. It's really dark. So if I position this well so that you can see. Let me just select this and hit the numpad period key. I can do a Shift A. Then I can add a light. But this time it's going to be like an area. Okay. Then it's really huge. So first thing I'm going to do is I'll switch to the right view. Actually, let me hide the plane. So the light is there. So if I hit GZ, it's there, it's working. The power for the light, and it's placed in the scene objects collection. So I can hit M, move it to lighting and render. So I want to rotate it. So if I squish this at the end, so at the top here, we can change the transform pivot from median point to 3D cursor. So the 3D cursor is at the origin. So if I change this to 3D cursor, that means if I rotate, the point of rotation will be from the 3D cursor. Because right now, if I do that, it's from the light itself. So that's the pivot of rotation from the light itself. So instead of using median point, I'll use 3D cursor. I can hit R and rotate this. Okay. I need to move it to the other side. So here, like so. Let me get back into the camera view. Okay, so like so. And if I turn it off, turn it back on, you can see what I'm trying to fix. But I don't want it to be like a really strong light. So I'll set its power to, let's say, 4. Because I still want there to be shadow, but just not too much like this, right? Then, of course, I can change back the transform pivot point to median point. And I can call this the bottom light. Okay. So far so good. Our lighting looks okay, right? So we have our 3 lights, our key, our fill, our back, and our bottom light. Another thing I'd like us to add is an environment map. So the easiest way to do that is if I go to the top here where we have the shading options, that is on the top, right? The last one is rendered. So if you click on rendered and then click on the drop down, see that we have under lighting, we have scene world. The scene world, you can turn it off, right? Because by default it's on. Turn it off so that you can see the scene world, or maybe deselect it. And then you can click on this sphere and then you get several options that Blender provides. These HDRI maps, these are environmental maps, which you can click and can adjust the strength, right? So that's something you can choose to use. If I turn it off, if I look at my render, sorry, I go back here. Let me change this back. If I click on this drop down as well, because it's also in the camera view, choose scene world, and notice it makes it really bright, which is something that you might not want, but you can use it, but then lower the strength. You can choose not to use it. Personally, I'll use it, but I think I'll load mine as we start creating the materials, right? Because this could work if we turn off all the, let me turn back the strength to 1. If we turn off all of these lights, our scene is still illuminated because we have this environment map, right? And depending on the type of image you choose, the temperature of your scene, or like the colors in your scene, they'll change, right? So you can reduce, can increase. So it depends on what you're kind of looking for. You can choose to rotate it if whatever it's giving you something you don't like. So sometimes you can work primarily with this type of image. Sometimes you need to work with all of the techniques. You need to have lights, you need to have an environment like this one. So I'll just turn this back on. So for the map, that's something that I'll add later on when we're adding the material. But up to this point, we do have our scene well set up with the lights and all of that, right? So maybe I could just bump this up a bit. Let's say to 5. 5. That is the power for the bottom light. So this is actually fine by me. You can start setting up the materials for this. So we'll start with the candy. So just move this up. And then I'll change the editor from timeline to shader editor, or whichever editor you're on. And then I can click on new, or with this mesh selected, we can go to the last icon in the settings for the object, and we can click on new. Then I can rename this, so I'll call this candy. Okay, so we'll work on this step by step. So we'll start with the color and then move on from there. So my Node Wrangler add-on is active, so that is under edit, preferences, add-ons. This Node Wrangler, so it is active. Because of some of the shortcuts we're going to use, I would recommend that you turn that on. And then of course, save preferences. So we'll start with the noise. So I'll hit Shift A, then noise. So I want to have the candy be red, but I don't want it to be like a perfect red all over, because in real life, you'll never find an object that has one pure singular color. So to introduce that variation, we'll use a noise. So for this to work, first of all, we need to preview it. So I'll go to the rendered view. We can hit Z, rendered. And then I'll select this and hit Ctrl T. Then I need to preview this. So I'll hit Ctrl Shift, click. So Ctrl Shift and click on this, right? Then, so Ctrl T for this, Ctrl Shift and click to preview the noise. Then once this can be previewed, you can come in and adjust the scale, as you can see. And then you can adjust things like the detail as well, the distortion, but this is a bit much, so 0 is fine. So this is just like basic noise. That's just going to allow us to create color variation. So I'm going to maybe make use of 5. Then we need to assign colors for the black and the white of this noise. So I'll hit Shift A, and then I'll add a color ramp. And with it kind of floating around, just connect it after the noise texture. So just click. So I want to use a red, or you can make it whatever color you like, because the ring pop candies come in many colors. You have red ones, you have green ones, you have yellow ones. So whichever color that pleases you. I'll click on this particular stop and then come and change the color. So I'll take this up. That is the value. And I want this to be red. So I'll pick a red, but then I want it to be like a darker red, right? And I'll copy this hex code. Then I'll select the second stop. Then I'll paste the hex code. And then what I'm going to do for this second stop, I'm going to increase the value a bit, right? So you can see that where there was black, you have like a darker red. Where there was white, you have a red, but that's slightly lighter than the darker one. Then I can connect this color ramp to the color of this principled BSDF. So the principled BSDF is going to allow us to achieve the result that we're looking for, because right now we're just previewing through the result that these 4 nodes are producing, right? Another thing I'd like to change here is the texture coordinate. I've been using generated, but I'd like to change it to object. And if I preview this for the noise, you can see we have generated, then we have object. So for now, I think you can leave it because I'm happy with this. But if you're having problems, you can change it to object, and then you can start making your adjustments. So you have to now adjust scale even further. And if I preview it, you can see this is what we have. So I think I'll leave it at object because I've already made the change. So I'll connect it to color, then BSDF output to surface. And now we do have our red color. That's the red or the candy. But we are yet to kind of have the candy look, but we're going to get to that. Adjust these knots slightly further, just a bit. The reason I'm doing so is so that I can see that the darker parts are being seen, just to add a bit of contrast. Okay, so it doesn't have to be super obvious. Then we need to have a bit of surface displacement. So for surface displacement, we're going to make use of a bump node. So when I say surface displacement, I mean surface, like the roughness of a surface. Like nothing is 100% smooth. Sometimes you can have holes, you can have scratches, whatever it is that a surface might have. That's what I mean by surface displacement. So I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to use a bump. Okay. So I can use this noise texture. So usually the bump works well with black and white nodes and black and white images. So I'll use this noise texture to create my bump. So I'll direct this factor from the noise to the height input of the bump. So I'll click on this and direct it to the height. And then for the bump itself, I'm going to direct it to the normal of the principal BSDF. So normal to normal. So data types must match. And now you'll see that we do have some roughness. And if I preview the bump by hitting Control Shift, we can see that it's very rough. So we can reduce the strength. So we can reduce the strength to really tiny, because I want it to have like a really, really tiny bump, not something that's obvious like that. It's just, it's there, but it's subtle. So maybe something like that. Okay. Then I can Control Shift, click on the principal BSDF to preview. Okay. Then Usually with these types of candies, they do have like a bit of scratches, and also they have holes. So let's start with the holes. So I'll hit Shift A, and then we'll search for Voronoi texture. Voronoi texture gives you circles that are black and others and a white background. Sorry, so our circles that are black and a white background. So I'll click on that. Then I'll connect this to the mapping. So we have this mapping node. So I'll connect this to the vector input of the Voronoi. And then if I preview this, Control Shift, you can see that not much is happening, but we can come in and increase the scale. If I start increasing the scale, we can see we have black, we have white. So the black sections can be the black dots, and then the white sections can be the white background. But right now there's no distinction between the two. So to create that distinction, we'll need to add a color ramp, but this time we're not using it to remap color, we're using it to create contrast. So I'll hit Shift A, then I'll type in color and we look for color ramp, and then connect it just after the Voronoi. Then adjust this, but actually basically these tops, I'm going to bring the white closer to the black one. Okay, and then we have this. If you increase the detail, you'll start to see that some of the dots will start disappearing. So you can leave it at 0 for this, but I'll increase it just a bit, maybe something like that, right? And here we have our holes, right? These are going to be the holes. So the blacks are going to kind of have like a inside indentation, and then the whites will remain as they are. But there are too many, so I can reduce this. And again, if I reduce the scale, that means I have to come back to the color ramp and adjust the stops. So that's something that you'll have to remember. Okay. Then I'll create another noise. So I'll hit Shift A, create another noise. And with this noise, what I want it to do, if I just make this window large so that you can see the connection, let me move this here. So I want to connect this vector to the vector for the noise. Then if I preview this, Control Shift and increase the scale, I want to increase the contrast of this in a way that is going to allow me to have irregular scratches. So I'll hit Shift A and I'll add a color ramp, and then I'll adjust these knots, the stops. Okay, I can increase the scale. So I want it to have like, I want them to be like scratches, but they're not like proper scratches. Okay, so something like that. Something like that. So these ones are very circular, very perfect circle, and these ones are not. So I want to mix them together. I want to combine them together. And then the final result will drive now the surface displacement. So I'll hit Shift A and then I'll add a mix color node. So with this mix color node, I'm going to connect the color for this first color ramp to A, and then the color for this second color ramp to B. So that's what I'll do, like so. Then if I preview this mix, so Control Shift click, this is what we have. Usually the mix node makes use of blending modes. So the blending mode that we're going to use for this is, if I click on this mix option, the blending mode that I would like to use is darken. So I'll click on darken, and then there's this value called factor. and I'll increase it to 1 so that both of them have the same influence, instead of one having more influence than the other. If, for example, we use mix, if I set it to 1, we will see more of this noise. If I set it to 0, we will see the dots from the Voronoi. So that's not what I want. I want all of them to be visible at the same time, so they're like being combined at the same time. So I'll use darken, and I'll set the factor to 1. Okay, then I'll add another bump. So we already have this bump, I'll add another one. So I'll hit Shift A, type in bump, and then I'll connect this second bump after the first one. So the software will automatically connect this normal to the normal of the second bump. So normal to normal. So again, data types must be similar. So you can't connect this however you like, because sometimes if you do that, it won't work. So in the normal that is coming from this previous bump, this is going to work quite well. Then this darken needs to be connected to the height input of this second bump. So that's what I'll do. Then I'll preview, so Control Shift. And then you see we have our displacement, right? But this is a lot. So I'll reduce the strength to a lower value. Okay. So it needs to be there, but it doesn't need to be like a crazy amount. So I'll just reduce this to a lower value. Okay. And then I'll preview the principal BSDF by Control Shift clicking on it, and then you can make further adjustments to the strength, right? So here we've stacked 2 bump nodes. So we have the first one, and then we have the second one. So the first one was just like a slight surface roughness from the noise that is driving the colors, and then the second one is to create like surface imperfections like scratches, bumps, and all of that, right? If I preview, that's what we have. Make this look like actual candy. We'll now need to come into the principled BSDF and make our changes, right? So we're going to need to introduce a bit of shininess, right? So it's very flat by default. It is shiny, but not in the way that you would think candy is, or you know that candy is. So we've kind of set up the color. The next thing is metallic. This is not something that we want to be metallic, but if you ever wanted to create a metallic material, you can set this to 1 and you'll get a metal, and this would look really interesting as a metal, right? But that's not what you're looking for. So the first thing that I want to adjust is the roughness. So candy is very shiny, so we need to lower this value. If we increase it, the material becomes very flat. But if we reduce it, it becomes very shiny, right? And then we have the IOR, which is the index of refraction. We're going to leave it at 1.5. And then we have now the thing that's going to make this look like actual candy is transmission. So if we look at the settings, we have transmission. For the transmission, you'll increase the weight to 1, and it becomes see-through, like you can see through it, but it's not the best compared to what we expect. This is not the best. So we're going to need to introduce something else. So we want, or I want, that when light passes through, it doesn't pass through completely, that there's a volume inside here that kind of, in a way, clouds it so that it's not purely see-through. So to kind of achieve that, I'll hit Shift A, and then we'll use a volume absorption node. This volume absorption node is going to be connected to the volume input of the material output. So the volume to volume. So the color here, I'm going to set it to a red. So I'm going to go to my red color. So I'll choose the darker one. I'll click on the color and I'll copy the hex code. So whichever color you've used, yellow, purple, whatever you want. Then I'll come to this color option and I will paste and enter. Then I'll need to increase the density. So for the density, I'm going to use, let's say 100. And when I do that, you'll now see that it's not as, doesn't allow light to pass through as much as before. So I'll set this to, let's say 250. This is really, really dark. So maybe I could try 150. So it's still really dark. Maybe I could brighten up the color. If I brighten it up too much, it becomes weird, right? But I do feel it's because of the environment. So we need an environment. So I'll leave it at 150. Then at the top of this shader editor, we have this object option. So I'll choose world. If I go to the top here where we have the preview options, like if it's wireframe, solid, shading, or render, if we click on this drop down, I am using a scene world. Actually, I'm not. I think that was for the shading. So I'm not. So I think I should introduce one. So there are many ways to introduce a world. So we can do it in the world option of the shader editor, or you can come to this drop down, choose a scene world, and notice this changes, right? So the reason this was looking so dark is because we have a black environment, as you can see with this color. So that's why. So I'd like to change this. So in my case, I'm not going to use this. I'll turn off scene world. I'll hit Shift A and I'll look for environment texture. When it's added, I'll hit Control T to bring up the texture coordinate in the mapping. Then I'll click on Open and I'll browse to where I have my HDRIs. So I'll go to Documents. I think that's where I have mine. So I have my HDRI. So here they are. I have downloaded them. I'll pick one. I think I want a studio one. And click on Open Image. When it comes to HDRIs, you need to go to HDRI Haven, I think it's called. It's not called Polyhaven. So when you go to Polyhaven, here you can have access to a lot of HDRIs that you can use for your scenes. So download them and load them up, right? So I'll connect this color option to the color option of the background. And then if I go back to, actually I've reduced the strength. So let me use maybe 0.6, right? Okay. Then I can go to world object. Then I can increase this density maybe to 250. And I like that. But now we have an issue where we're seeing this image. That is the HDRI. So if I rotate around, you can see that's what we're seeing. I don't want to see it, right? So if you don't want to see it, we can go to the render settings, and in the render settings we have under film is this option called transparent. If you turn this on, it gets rid of the HDRI, like you can't see it, but it's still working in the scene. So I'll turn on transparent, and this is what we have, right? So you can play around with the density. So if I set it to 100, it's something different. Set it to 2500, it's something different, as you can see. So yeah, so in my case, I found 250 worked really well. It's a matter of experimentation. Do you want it to look really dark? Do you want it to be very light? But normally these candies are the color is very saturated and dense in a particular way, right? So there's the candy. So that's how you create this material. So a combination of different techniques, but mostly we've made use of the noises to help us achieve this particular result. The next object we'll create a material for is the overflow. So I'll select it And then I can click on new and I can rename it from here. So I can call it Candy Overflow. So we'll use the same techniques as before with it. So I'll start with the color. So when it comes to the color, we can copy from this, from the candy itself. So we can come to this node setup for the candy, select these nodes, copy, Control C, then select this, paste, Control V. Then all we have to do is we need to add a texture coordinate and a mapping node. So I'll select the noise texture, hit Control T, and then we'll choose the object output of the texture coordinate. Then we'll preview the noise because we can't assume that this is going to work correctly. So we can make our changes if need be. Okay, so let's say something like that, 360. And adjust the detail a bit. Maybe leave the roughness as it was, right? Then we can preview. So this looks okay. Then I can connect it to the base color. And we can preview the base color. So for this, the color remains the same, right? I just added a bit more contrast by moving these tops a bit closer to each other. Then we need to add surface imperfections. So a bit of roughness, but here it's more of like holes. So I'll add a new Voronoi. I'm not going to copy the Voronoi. And then I'll connect this mapping to the vector of the Voronoi. I'll preview the Voronoi, sorry, Control Shift. Then I'll increase the scale, something like that. Then I will add a color ramp to create contrasts. And actually I'll move the white towards the black. Okay. Maybe I want them to be like really tiny dots. Maybe increase this. Something like that. Then we can add a bump, Shift A, bump. Then I can connect the color to the height, then the normal to the normal. Then I can preview this. And of course, this strength is a bit much, so I'll reduce it. Okay. Something like that. So then I can come in here and make a few adjustments. So for the roughness, I can reduce it. Then for the transmission, we change it to 1. Now they look like they're similar. But this one is very rough. Sorry, very shiny, not even rough, very shiny. So I can increase the roughness to make it less shiny. Okay. Then we can add a volume absorption too. But if you're happy with it as is, because this is a very like thin film of candy. So if I go into the camera view, yeah, I could leave it as is. It doesn't require the volume absorption, but you could add it if you'd like. Personally, I've left it out, right? Okay, so that's how you create the material for the candy overflow. So similar techniques to creating the materials for the candy. This material is for the bubbles. I call them bubbles, but they're actually crystallized sugar. So I'll select the bubbles Then I'll click on new. So I'll make sure under the editors, under the shader editor, click on new. Then I'll just call this material candy bubbles. Then I'm going to delete the principled BSDF. So I'll select it and I'll hit X. And then I'll hit Shift A and I'll search for glass. So I'll use a glass BSDF. Then I'll connect this BSDF output to the surface input of the material output node. And if I kind of deselect to C, nothing is happening, although this material has been assigned to the bubbles. But because we're using geometry nodes, we actually have to assign this material to the node that we set up, that is called set material in the geometry nodes setup. So in the editors for this window, I'll choose geometry node editor. Then we have this set material node. So in this material option, I will define the material, so candy bubbles. Then once I do, you notice that now we have our bubbles. Then I'll go back to the shader editor. So one thing that I could change is the IOR, so the index of refraction. So the index of refraction of crystallized sugar, because that's what this is about 1.46. So I think 1.5 is fine. So I'm not going to change it. Or we can actually input 1.46. Still fine. If I select this, then you can adjust the roughness. So right now we actually have clear view of the bubbles, but if you adjust the roughness, they become a bit blurry. So if you wanted them to not look as sharp as they do, with the roughness at 0, we could increase that, and this makes them look less distinct to the view. Another thing I could do is I could make this material for the candy to be a bit darker. So in the volume absorption node, I could increase the density to maybe twice what I have. So let's say 500. And this makes it darker than before. So maybe I could do 450. Yeah? And this is actually what I'll use. So I want it to seem like it's not overly bright. But again, if you want it to be bright, that's also fine. This is a matter of taste. Personally, I didn't want it to be that bright. So I think 450 is fine. So that's how we set up the material for the bubbles by using a glass BSDF, adjusting the roughness, assigning the material in the geometry node, editor set material node. To focus on the plastic. So with the plastic selected, and in regards to the editors, I am in the shader editor. So I want to swap from geometry node editor to shader editor. Then I can click on new. I can call this plastic. So when it comes to the plastic, there's not much going on with it. It's going to make mine blue and give it a bit of bump. We'll call it a day. So I'll hit Shift A and I'll search for a noise texture. And then I'll hit Control T to bring up the texture coordinate and the mapping node. Then I'm going to use the object option from the texture coordinate. Okay. And then I will Control Shift on the noise texture to preview it. Then I can increase the scale. So until I start seeing the noise, right, as you can see. So I'm using object because I want the object itself to be used to kind of control the placement of the noise. So for most of these, we've made use of the object option. And that's because for these and these, I don't have UVs. I don't have UVs for this. I don't have UVs for that. And apart from the plane that we added, that one has UVs. It is a Blender object. So we're going to talk about how to set this up using UVs when we set up the plane material. So for this, I think this is fine. So maybe I could do 50. Then I'll add a color ramp because I want to remap the black and white to specific colors. So color ramp, and then I will choose a blue color. So I'll click on the first stop, then click on the area for changing the color. I'll increase the value. Then I'll make this blue. The reason I'm making it blue is because, of course, that's the color that I want. And I find it better that the red looks better against the blue. Okay, so I'll make it blue, like a darker blue, like that one. And I could make it slightly darker. Then I can click on the white stop. Actually, before I do that, I can copy this hex code from that first stop. And then click on this stop for the white. And then paste. I think I've copied twice. So let me copy. And then paste. So now they look the same, similar. But I want to make this slightly brighter, but not too bright, because now we're going to have a really good distinction between the darker blue and the lighter blue. So I just want it to be subtle. Yep, so something like that. And then we can connect this to the base color. And then we can preview the principled BSDF, Control Shift click. And we see we have our blue, right? Very nice looking blue. And if I go to the modifiers, I just want to check that the levels in the viewport are set to 2, like they match with the ones in the render. Then I need to give it like a bit of surface displacement, just a tiny bit, like really tiny. So what I'm going to do is I'll hit Shift A and then I'll search for bump. So remember, the bump uses the black and white colors of the texture nodes, and most of the time it is the noise texture or the wave or gradient or ramp, a black and white node, or also an image that is black and white. So you can download other images if you like, and then feed them to the height option, make your adjustments, and you will still get a bump. So the logic still remains the same. So I'm going to connect this factor output to the height input of the bump. Then I'm going to direct this normal output of the bump to the normal input of the principled BSDF. And notice that now it's really rough, or rather bumpy, not even rough, it's bumpy, right? So I'm going to reduce the strength. Okay, just a bit. I want a bit of bump. You can create a noise texture node specifically for the bump if you'd like, but I just wanted to use this one because I already have it, and I don't want the bump to kind of overpower everything else that is happening. So I felt like it's fine to just use this, but you can create one on your own. Okay, then we can come into the principled BSDF. The principled BSDF, we have the roughness. So I want it to be shiny plastic. So I'll reduce the roughness, but not like too much, because this is going to be too much. I want it to be rough, but not, or rather shiny, but not too shiny. So let's do like a 0.45. Okay, let me get into my camera view and see what's up. Yeah, so I like this. Then I'm going to apply the same material to the ring pop. So with this ring pop selected, I'll click on this drop down, this icon over here, to the left of new. I'm not going to create a new one. I just wanted to use the same plastic. So I'll click on the drop down, and then click on plastic. There we have it. We have our material. But here, you'll notice that of course it's really dark, so we're not seeing the shiny surface, but that's fine. But up to this point, we have our object that has all the shaders and materials set up. So this is going to mark the end of like setting up the materials. What is left is setting up a background, which you already set up. You just need to create a material for that. Now we can start working on the background. This is plane that I'd created. If I reveal it by revealing it in the viewport and in the render, just call it BG background. And I want us to create a material for it. So with the object selected, we can go to shader editor, click on new. Then I can call this background. Then I'm going to get rid of this principled BSDF. So hit X, and then hit Shift A. And we're going to add a gradient node. So a gradient node is going to allow us to create a background that has a gradient, but this time I want it to be like a radial gradient, so circular. So I'll hit Control T to bring up the texture coordinate and the mapping. Then I can click on Control Shift and click on the gradient texture to see what's happening. So in terms of texture coordinates, so far we've been using objects, and right now I want to use UV. So I'll change it from generated to UV. If I zoom out, we can't see much. So I'm going to change the type of gradient that we're using from linear to radial. Still can't see anything. So I'm going to add a color ramp. And click, and then I'll adjust this. Now we're going to start seeing something, right? Actually, I'll change this to spherical, not radial, sorry, because that was kind of strange. So we're seeing a bit of the gradient at the top here. So what I'm going to do is, this gradient is at the top. I zoom out. It's really at the top, and I want to bring it to the center. So I made the plane be really huge, but you can make it to be small to fit your needs. But for me, I'd like it to be this size. Then I want to move this to where the object is. So I'll go back to the camera view. Then in the mapping, I will adjust the X, and I'll adjust the Y. I'll adjust the X again, right? And then I want to make the circle to be less white. So I can move this here, right? So what I want is, I want to have like two colors, similar colors, to kind of drop off over time. So now that I've set this up, I have to remap the colors. So the black, I need to change it to something. The white, I need to change it to something. So I'll leave that as is. Then I'm going to change the interpolation from linear to B-spline. And the reason I want to do that is because I don't want there to be banding. Because if I go to linear, you can actually see exactly where the white ends, exactly where the black begins. And I don't want that to be as obvious. And for that to be possible, we are going to need to use B-spline. Then you can have a bit of better control, right? So I'm going to use a yellow for the background. Yellow complements the blue. That's why I chose yellow. So I'll click on this stop and go to its color. And I'm going to type in the color that I want. So it's EOB, or E0, not O, but E0B 400FF. Okay. And as you can see, this is actually quite nice if I get into the camera view. So it's quite nice. And notice we don't have that banding. So let me go back to linear. So you can see here, it's very obvious where the colors kind of meet. And with B-spline, it's not. It's kind of creating like a gradual fall off. Then I can add another knot. So I can click on plus, so a stop, that is. And with this second stop here, I can change the color to FFDF, and then 02FF, right? And then this last one, instead of it being white, I could give it like a lighter yellow, so it's going to be F, 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 F. So those are 4 Fs, 92FF. Okay, and there we have our background, right? So it makes the object pop. Then we can make a few changes to, for example, the bubbles. Maybe I want to reduce the roughness because I want them to be seen distinctly, because we do have a background that kind of provides a good backdrop for that. So I'll leave it at that. Then you can create or select the candy, not even create it. You reduce the density, see what you have. I think this is fine. 250 was a good number, but of course, it would be remiss if I just input like the final values that I use. I also want to show you that you can have placeholder values that you kind of tinker with as you continue refining your scene, so that you know that things are not final in regards to when you're creating something. You can always come back, you can always change, you can always refine. So that's something that I usually like to reinforce, that you need to move back and forth until you're satisfied with your results. So at this point, I'm quite happy with this. One thing that I would like to adjust if I select the background is I want to avoid having flat lighting. So for this to be possible, I'd need to use something else. So we're going to make use of two shaders. So we have emission, and then we also have diffuse, BSDF. So both of these are shaders. So we'll need to make use of the mix shader node. So I'll hit Shift A and type in mix shader. So we've used mix color. We are to use a mix shader, but it does work the same way. So with the mix shader, you have the factor which you can feed in a mask. Then you have shader 1 and shader 2. So shader 1 represents the 0 value, shader 2 represents the 1 value. So anything that is that you want to be replaced in the black parts of the mask, you feed it to shader 1. Anything that you want replaced in the white parts of the mask, you feed it to shader 2. But if you're not using a mask, you just have to know that shader 1 in regards to the factor is 0, shader 2 is 1, and then 0.5 is kind of like mixing both of them 50%, 50% each, right? So I'm going to connect this color ramp color output to both the inputs of the color of these particular nodes. So I'll feed this here, and then I'll feed the emission to shader 1, the diffuse to shader 2, and then I will feed this shader to surface. And the main reason why I'm doing this is I want to not have a flat look. So the strength here for the emission, I'm going to take it down maybe to 0.8. Then for the diffuse, I'm not going to change much. It's going to stay as is. Then you can play around with the factor. So if I reduce it just a bit, I want the mix shader to lean more into the emission. And if I increase it, I want the mix shader to lean more to the diffuse. So if I take it to 0, you can see this is what we have. I take it to 1, you can see this is what we have. So to get rid of that flatness, we mix both of them. So I'll use a value of maybe 0.45. So something like that. Now that we have that, we have all the elements for our scene, right? So what's left is just doing the render. But of course, feel free to basically experiment. Use different colors for the candy. Use different colors for the plastic, for your background. Experiment. I like to do the render. So to do that, we can go to render image. So remember, I'm using cycles. If I go to the render settings, I'm using cycles. GPU compute, the samples, maximum samples that I'm using for both the viewport and the renderer are the same, 256. Then there's nothing else that I've changed apart from turning on transparent so that the HDRI that we've used is not seen. But we can still get into these settings, go into color management, and we can change the view to something else, for example, filmic. but personally I don't like it for this because it makes it it's a bit much for me. If I change the look to very high contrast, it's still a bit much. So I'm going to leave it at AGX and the look none. So this is how I want it to look like. But again, if I go to my to render the image once more, you've noticed that this material for the candy is very flat. It has no depth, no realism or anything like that. And it kind of bothers me that it doesn't have that. So you're going to refine it just a bit. And then I think by then the render will start looking good. So what I'm going to add are scratches. So I'll select the mesh for the candy. Then I will move this. And I want to add another bump. So Shift A, bump. Okay. Then I want to add an image that I'm going to use for the scratches. So I can hit Shift A, then I'll type in image, and we have image texture. And then, of course, I can go to this other side and kind of pull this connection from here, but I don't want that. I'll create a new texture node and mapping node. So Control T. And under the texture coordinate, I'm going to be using object. Okay. Then I actually need to load my texture. So I'll click on open, and then I'll go to where I have saved the texture. So I'll link the texture that I've used in the description. So I have a folder that I call scratches, and in here, this is a free scratches images that I got. I'll link the site in the description. So I'm going to use whether I use the black, the white. So I'm going to use the white. And then I'll click on open. And then I need to preview it. So Control Shift click. And we'll need to change a few things because this does not look good. So the first thing that I'll change is the texture projection. So by default here, it's set to flat. And I'll change it to box. And then I need to adjust the scale so that I can start seeing the results. But instead of doing it from here, I'll use a value node. So I'll hit Shift A, add value, and click. Then I'll connect this value output to the scale input. Then I'll start increasing the scale. So right now you can see that things are moving, but you can't see them clearly. So we'll need to introduce a color ramp. Okay. So color ramp, connect it after the image. Then I can start making adjustments. If I move the black stop, you can see that now we can see the scratches, right? So adjusting the scale allows us to choose the basically how many scratches we'd like to have, so to speak, because the higher the scale, the smaller the scratches become, the more they become on the surface. So yeah, and the smaller it is, the larger the scratches. So this is going to be up to you. So if you increase, you want a lot of scratching. If you increase the value, if you reduce the value, you want very huge scratches like that. Yeah, that's what you want. That could be something you want. This would be cool, I'd say, right? So we could try it out as it is. If I rotate around, kind of looks wacky, but let's try it out. So I could connect the color. So let me make this large so that you can see the connection. This color output to the height input of the bump. Then if I preview the principal BSDF, you can see this is a bit much. This is crazy, right? But that shows us it's working. So if you wanted like huge scratches, you just need to reduce the strength And there it is, right? And if I go to render image, and we render this, you can see now it doesn't look as flat and as boring as it was before, right? So this is something that I would recommend that you do. Add to the realism, because these surfaces are not always like crisp and untarnished, right? So let me change this to slot 2 so that if I render something else, we can compare. So then I can, in my case, I want them to be like tiny, like that. Then to reduce the contrast for the objects. Then if I preview this, actually I'll preview from the bump, so shift click on the bump, and if we zoom in, we can see of the noise, and I can preview from the principal BSDF. I get into the camera view. So now if I render again in the second slot, the first slot has the previous render. So for me personally, I like this one. That's the one I'm going to use. So if I compare, we have the first one, it's a bit chunky. I have the second one. So I think it's a matter of taste, but I feel like this one is a bit much. You could use this, but maybe make the strength of the bump be really, really tiny so that it doesn't become overpowering. So I just want like these imperfections over here as well, just to add to the realism, right? Let's do slot 3 now and minimize that. Then I want to do the same for the overflow. So for that, I'll select the overflow mesh and go to its material. Then I'll move this by hitting G. I'll add a new bump. Then you can hit Shift A, and we're going to add image texture, right? And then remember, Control T. We're going to use Object. Click on Open, and then go to where the image is. I'm still going to use the same image as before. So scratches, I'm using the white one. Okay, then I can preview. Then again for the scale, I can hit Shift A, add a value node, connect it. Then I can make adjustments. And we should start seeing something. I'm seeing something. So I'll change the projection to box, and I'll hit Shift A and add a color ramp. Then I can adjust. This. Maybe I can reduce the scale. Okay. Then I can connect this to the bump. So here's the bump. So I'll connect the color, this color, to the height. Then I can preview that bump. So this is a bit much, so I'll reduce the strength. Okay. Then for this, I feel like I don't need it to be that aggressive. So for my scale, I'll adjust it like so. Then let's go back to the bump and preview that. I'll increase the strength and get into the camera view. So for this, I want to see it in camera. So I'm going to have the strength a bit up because it's thin. So something like that. And then I can, again, Control Shift, click on the principal BSDF to preview. And I can increase the strength. Because for this, I really want it to be obvious. Then I can go to render image. This is what we have, right? And if I compare from the first one, so this is the first one, then the second one, then the third one. For this, I really want to see the scratches. For the Overflow. Then I can choose slot 4. Then what we can do, you can actually select the candy, and then you can play around with the color. Sorry, not the color, but the density, the volume absorption, right? So I'll set mine to 450. So you can try 450, try 50, until you get something that you like. So if you wanted the colors a bit brighter, you can go for it. Now it looks perfect. No matter what you change, the color is just going to become darker and darker the higher you go, and lighter the lower you go with the density. So this is something I wanted to add before we did the render. You can be able to render out the image and then do a bit of compositing and create our final output. So to render out the image, we'll go to render image, and you'll give it a few seconds, I guess. Once it's done, I can minimize this. Then we can go to the compositing layout. In the compositing layout, it's going to be divided into two. We have the compositor at the bottom and then the image editor at the top. So whatever changes we make here, you're going to see them here in our image. So I'm going to click on new, and it's going to read from our render directly. But of course, if you do not, if you save your render before, you can add the image node, and then you can click on open and import your image, then connect this to this, then you can remove this. But in our case, we don't need to do that because I've just rendered it right now. So the first thing that I want us to add is a simple RGB curves node. So I'm going to hit A, search for RGB, and then I'll click on RGB curves. Just slight color correction. So I'll zoom into the RGB curves, and I'll start by first of all adjusting all the colors under C. So I'll create a simple S curve. So I'll take this up, and you notice that it's going to update at the top, and then I'll come here, bring this down. So this is like a simple contrast curve, right? Then I'll go to the red channel, and I want to kind of bump up the red. So I'll come somewhere here, click and drag this up. Should make this a bit more red. Then I can select this node and hit M to mute, and then M to turn it back on, just to see the changes that I have made. So if you don't want to make it more red, that's fine. We can take it back to where it was, or we can select this and hit delete. Oh, that, sorry, Control Z. So we can take it to where it was, but I want it to be slightly red. So somewhere there. So again, mute it. Okay. Then the other thing I want to add is I want the ends to be darkened a bit, although they're darkened, but I just want it to be a bit obvious. So at the bottom here, we have the vignette effect. So I can click and hold and drag it here, and then I can drag it where that line is. It should connect. Then we need to make a few changes on the vignette. Can reduce the factor. So I can increase the feather, then reduce the factor. Okay, reduce the feather a bit. Then I can mute it. So it's a subtle change, but I want to have it, right? So just a bit. So I go back to all the color channels. So this is what we have. And then in the RGB curves, if you want to reduce the effect of these changes, you can adjust the factor. So we can lower the factor, it goes back to defaults, and then you can take it to the changes that we've made. So you can maybe make it be at 0.5 so that it's not much. So M. Okay. Then we have this. So I'll take it maybe 2.8 7. I think that will work. Yeah. So once you're satisfied in this image editor, you can go to image at the top, save as, and then you change the name. So I'm going to call this Ring Pop Candy, and then choose your directory, and then under media type on the left hand side we have image, format PNG, color RGBA. We can use RGB because essentially we don't have any transparency, but I'll leave it at RGBA because A is for alpha, which is transparency. The color depth, I'll set it to 16, and then I'll click on save. So under color management, I'm not changing anything. It's going to follow the scene, but keep in mind I did not use any color management settings when I was setting up the project. So just tell it to follow the scene, but if you wanted to make changes, you can override and make these changes. So because I didn't use filmic and all of that. So follow scene and then click on save image. Your image should be saved. Okay, so this is how I created this product, because it is a candy, so it is a product. That's how I created it in Blender.